Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Cooper here, aka Coop a Fiasco. This is Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco, and what a fiasco yesterday. My goodness, what a ridiculous first round. I mean, it started off chalk, right? And then it got crazy. And it goes to show that, and this happens in fantasy football too, where if your rankings or your predictions are exactly right, people will call you crazy. Like if you were to post this draft on your timeline a week ago, people would call you nuts. And Falcons fans would be unfollowing, you, right? Like you look at some of these picks and they don't make sense to us, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I always go back and look at certain picks that boggled our minds and that the fans hated. For instance, the Eagles taking Jalen Hurts when they already had Carson Wentz coming off an MVP season and what he probably would have won the Super Bowl in Nick Foles' place. Who knows? But people hated that pick, and now they love the player. So we'll have to see. But what we're going to do today on the show, pretty simple. Yesterday we did a 6 to 8 p.m. on Sirius XM pre-draft show. I sat down, made some videos, ran the entire tracker for Fantasy Alarm, went over everything. We're going to recap the draft real quick in the first half of the show. Second half, we're going to look at the second round because these second and third rounds are the most important for fantasy football, no question. The first round, of course, that's where the quarterbacks go. That's where we're going to have the high end wide receivers go. But these second and third rounds are everything for fantasy football. When you look at the hit rates after the third round, they plummet. And a big reason is that in the modern NFL, there's all these compensatory picks. There's the Rule 2, J2CA picks, or there's all sorts of additional picks. So when you go back and look at older hit rates and you have these guys hitting in the fifth and sixth rounds, well, there weren't comp picks there. There definitely weren't nearly as many. Sometimes there's 10 picks at the end of the third round before the fourth round even starts. This year, there's like 6 or 7, but it pushes everything down. The second and third rounds are where it happens. This is where the money is made in your dynasty rookie draft, especially because you can rank these guys kind of however you want, right? Like you only have so much leeway at the top between Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze from here on out. And this goes for Xavier Legette going in the end of the first round, and the people going at the beginning of this round. You can do whatever you want, right? And with these first couple picks, you look at guys like T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. They went 1 and 2 to start the second round. So big day today, the biggest one, in my opinion, for true fantasy gamers and fantasy fans. The first round is for the casual NFL fans. The second and third round is for the fantasy gamers. And then the last round is for the deep diehard weirdos. And that's fun too, digging through the scrap heap and seeing who is going to be the Puka Nakua or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Very difficult to identify who that's going to be, but we're going to do our best. But today, this is the best day because we get to comb through the wreckage and we get to look at the second and third round coming up today at 7 p.m. And once again, Jim Bowden and Howard Bender and I will be on Sirius XM channel 87 from 5 to 7 p.m. tonight, getting you ready for that. But here's what we're going to do. Time for some deep cuts, no interruptions, no arguing with Jim about the Cowboys. This is the deep cut stuff. And then, on that show, we'll do all the fluff piece stuff and the betting stuff. So let's get into it. First overall pick, Caleb Williams to the Bears. There's all this talk about Jaden Daniels is the number one fantasy QB and this and that, and Caleb Williams paints his nails. This guy, if you actually watch him, the entirety of his career, the highlights, the lowlights, everything, this guy is electric. He can make things happen in a similar fashion to Patrick Mahomes. He extends plays. He can chuck the ball downfield with a flick of the wrist, right? Like Michael Vick used to do that. He used to just kind of scramble around, and then you'd think, oh, what's going to happen here? He's going to run it. And then next thing you know, he just goes boom. And there goes Algie Crumpler or Brian Finneran for a monster touchdown. And that's what Caleb Williams brings to the table. That's so exciting. And that's why he's my QB1 in Dynasty. Some of these other guys, we're going to have to especially at wide receiver, we need to see what happens with the second and third. But at QB, we can sort things out now, right? I did an article over on Fantasy Alarm talking about the hit rates of quarterbacks, and the hit rates are massively higher for the number one QB. They're massively higher for the number two QB. They're massively higher for the QBs that go in the first round. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is if it's sometimes none of them hit, and it's a terrible class. Sometimes one guy hits and everybody else is a bust. Sometimes the entire class is great. So if you're rooting for Michael Penix and you're rooting for JJ McCarthy, you're rooting for it to be one of those classes. It's very rare that the fourth or fifth guy hits and the first two bust. In fact, when you look at the third pick, the last time that the third pick had a QB1 season at some point in his career, top 12, and the first and two picks from that class never did was 1991 Brett Favre. The next closest you could say, I would say Jay Cutler. Vince Young had a QB1 season, and that lineup was a bust. That is another one where I would honestly, if you kind of really look at the parameters, that one would be one where like the QB3 did hit and the other two faded away very quickly. But for the most part, if the QB 3, 4, 5 hit, you have a hit with a one or two, or usually both, right? Like when Jalen Hurts hit, and everyone says, "Oh yeah, the QB5 can hit because Jalen Hurts is great." Well, that season you had Joe Burrow in the draft, Tua, Herbert, Jordan Love, and then Jalen Hurts. So you really, it's very difficult to you're threading a very thin needle saying JJ McCarthy is good and everybody else sucks. If you want to root for JJ McCarthy, the easier way to do so and the most realistic way to do so are to say this whole class is great. So that's where and honestly, I'm not ruling that out because we got some great players here. So at 2, Jaden Daniels off the board. He's going to be my QB2. You see all the Patriots stuff behind me. I'm a Patriots fan, but the QB2 hits at a higher rate. Also, mobile QBs have not only a great floor, but an amazing ceiling. I went in also after the fact and I looked at mobile quarterbacks, right? And I looked at quarterbacks that have gotten 80 carries in either of their first two seasons, right? So somewhere either year one or year two, they had an 80 carry season, which it kind of sounds like a lot, but not really. We're talking about less than 5 carries a game. 4.7 carries a game is an 80 carry season. And if you look at those metrics going back to 2000, there have been 15 different quarterbacks, right? The Cam Newtons and the Michael Vicks and everybody, right? Vince Young counts as well. 15 quarterbacks that have had 80 plus carries in one of their first two seasons. And of those quarterbacks, 14 of them had top 10 seasons. In fact, 14 of them finished 9 or better, right? And there's a few QB1 seasons in there for guys like Lamar Jackson. There's 2, 3, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. Like it, if you are a mobile quarterback, it's very easy to cross into that QB1 range very quickly. The one guy that didn't, the one quarterback that had 80 carries over his first two seasons and didn't finish top 10 was Tim Tebow, who finished at QB 17. And I don't think Jaden Daniels is Tim Tebow. So if he goes out and just runs at the level that we expect, because 80 carries, you look at some of these guys have gotten 150, 160, 170, right? If you look at Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they've had 120 or 100 plus in every single season. So Jaden Daniels, if he's healthy, he's running 80 times, and the odds of him being a top 10 quarterback are actually pretty good. So I'm going to take him too. For real life, I love Drake May, and I loved him. I love the pick for the Patriots, and he's got a big arm, and he can also run. I wouldn't call him rushing, but I'd call him mobile. So Drake May, I'm loving the pick myself. Personally, I was in on May the entire time, and I would have been happy with either guy at 3. I'm just glad they got one. So easy to be excited about May. He's going to be my QB3 easily, especially because the QB4 off the board probably isn't even going to start for his own team. And we'll get to that. At 4, Arizona takes Marvin Harrison Jr. No surprise at all, and I love it. He's the wide receiver 1. He was the wide receiver 1 before. This just confirms that. And honestly, if like Malik Neighbors went and then Marvin Harrison Jr. went next, then there'd be arguments that would have made for a lot spicier arguments. This makes it a lot easier to just be on board. What's up, chat? Toronto Dave, Jack, what's happening, man? Jack wants to know what do the Pats take to pair with May. Second half of the show, I'm going to look at the second and third rounds coming up, and the Patriots pick second in the second round. So very interesting there. There's a lot that can be done there. So I'm definitely excited to talk about that. What's up, Hi Luke? What's going on, man? Yeah, a lot to talk about in this first round. So let's get through it, and then we'll start speculating rampantly. Los Angeles Chargers at 5 take the most Jim Harbaugh pick you could possibly take with Joe Alt. Anybody that saw his speech, which was actually great, it was more of a rant to reporters. I think it was at the combine or at the coaches meetings. He basically made an amazing point, which is that every other position in football is dependent on other positions. except for offensive line. The quarterback depends on the offensive line. The running backs do. The wide receivers do. And he goes on to say, "Oh well, people will say, oh Jim, the defensive line doesn't depend on offensive line." He says, "You know what? That's probably the next closest one. But think about this: how many times do we say the offense didn't give the defense time to rest?" And that boils down to offensive line. So the offensive line is crucial. We knew he was going to do this. And of course, in Jim Harbaugh fashion, we can wrap up this pick with his quote, which people, they asked him about weapons, and he said to him, offensive linemen are weapons. Jim, oh boy, that's going to be a smash mouth football team with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh. And we'll talk about running back in that when we get to the second round here. So yeah, Joe Alt to the Chargers. I wanted them to take Brock Bowers. They didn't, is what it is. Malik Neighbors to the Giants. This is a classic case of best available. Darius Slayton led that team in snaps last year. So I think Malik Neighbors obviously becomes a wide receiver one immediately. The question is, do they like Darius Slayton to continue playing, or do they just move on to the young guys? I would love to see Malik Neighbors as your every down wide receiver, and then Jalen Hyatt as the field stretcher, and Wan'Dale Robinson as the slot flanker, and just kind of mix and match with those guys. I know they're going to put other guys in here and there, but that's what I want to see there. But yeah, Malik Neighbors, superstar. He's the wide receiver two for me in this class. Titans take J.C. Latham. A lot of people had Latham as the top tackle. Some people had Joe Alt. Doesn't matter. Tennessee ran Carthen, set himself up to have the easiest possible draft you could ever have, because he went out and he bought Calvin Ridley and he got Tony Pollard and he did all that in the offseason so that this draft, the fans would be content with them just taking the best tackle there was, and they did. So great. Awesome for them. Falcons' next pick obviously was the doozy. Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. absolutely wild. Nobody had that. I think my buddy actually had $5 to $155 on that for some reason. Not expecting it at that pick though, but just to go to that team. And again, you know what? I I go back and forth on this one. It stinks that they're going to like there's pros and cons. The cons are obvious. He's an older prospect already. And now you have a quarterback in Kirk Cousins who is under contract with guaranteed money for multiple years. So you're going to not only waste some of those prime age years for this player, but you're also going to waste a couple prime years of his contract, right? Look at Brock Purdy. And of course, Brock Purdy, he's only getting like $1 million a year because he was a last overall pick, but they can sign all those people and do all that stuff because of Brock Purdy's contract. And same win for Baker Mayfield's contract last year, is making $4 million. And these rookie deals, even as a first round pick, are a lot cheaper. And they're going to not utilize a lot of those years because they're paying two quarterbacks now. They're paying the quarterback position a lot of money, right? So that is the downside. The plus side is if they truly believe in this player, then this is the way it's been for a long time and the way it kind of should be. And it does work when it does work, right? Like we've seen we've seen the Packers do it twice now. Aaron Rodgers waited a long time, and Jordan Love waited a long time, and you didn't take advantage of the rookie contract. But who cares? Because you got the guy. You got the guy, and that's the most important thing. It's the most important position in football, right? So that's the argument on that side. Not to mention, these guys do at the quarterback position hold value more than any other position. So if you want to trade this player, then you can get good value back for the player. The Patriots drafted Jimmy G in the second round, and Tom Brady proved that he was just going to play forever. And then they were able to trade Jimmy G for a second, right? Josh Rosen, they were able to trade him for a second. Sam Darnold was traded for a second and change after he already essentially failed, right? Like these guys can be moved. This Falcons team, once upon a time, drafted Brett Favre in the second, and then before he even played, they traded him for a first to the Packers. That's crazy. That's unconventional, but quarterback does hold value. There are teams that were in on this player, and if Kirk Cousins just ends up being awesome, it wouldn't be hard to move him, and you could probably get a second back and maybe even a late first back. So it's not too crazy. The Jets were able to trade Zach Wilson. Exactly. There you go. Right. So it's like you can get value back, especially if he doesn't play, honestly, because these high end guys that are still mystery boxes, they have more value than the guys that do play, like the Mac Joneses and stuff, and they stink. So uh, there are arguments on both sides. I still don't like it. I don't like the pick. If you go and get Kirk Cousins, an older quarterback coming off an Achilles, you're trying to win now. So I think they could have made an impact there with a player that's going to play this year. But again, we'll have to see how it pans out. If he's awesome, that'll be just like Jalen Hurts all over again, where they went and got their guy, and he's gonna be their guy for a long time. At 9, the Bears took Roma Dunze. I like Roma Dunze. I think he's a good player. I for short term, I mean, this makes our lives easy in fantasy football world because now you can just rank Marvin Harrison 1 and Malik Neighbors 2 because people will say, "Oh, it's so great he gets to go play with Caleb Williams," but that team right now has DJ Moore. They have Keenan Allen, and Shane Waldron wants to rotate tight ends and sometimes use multiple tight ends. He uses a lot of 2 tight end sets. And they had Cole Kmet and they brought in Gerald Everett. So Roma Dunze might not play every single play right from the rip. Like people in their minds just think, oh, you're just gonna have 3 wide receivers out there every single play. Of course you are. Like that's just how it works. No team does that. Not the Bengals, not the Rams. The teams that do it the most in over the last like 10 years, maybe they get up to 80, 85%, but nobody's doing it 100% of the time. It's just not, teams just can't do, you can't do that. And somebody has to come out of the game, and it's probably going to be the rookie. So he'll probably be the third man in where it's DJ Moore out wide, and then it's Keenan Allen opposite him. And then they bring in Roman Dunze. Roman Dunze plays out wide, and Keenan Allen moves into the slot. And then when they go back to fullback or 2 tight end set, it's the rookie coming out. And that's why I'm not really going to be huge on Dunze in redraft, but in Dynasty, we still like him. We like him as the wide receiver 3. At 10, JJ McCarthy to the Vikings. They telegraphed it. They said they were going to do it. They did it. Everyone should be fired up about it, right? It's a good. Yeah, I think he's a good player. I think that the people. I don't care about the statistics. If he goes undefeated and wins the national championship, I mean, what did you want him to do? And I said this before on the show. Like, did you really want him to go to Jim Harbaugh and say, "Hey, I know we're winning every single Saturday, but maybe you let me throw it a little more, pad my stats"? What do you think Jim Harbaugh would say to that? There's no chance, right? So JJ McCarthy, if they like him, good to go. After that, we get this crazy how, and I'm sure people that were plugged in yesterday heard about it, but if you didn't hear, every single draft ever has had a defensive player go somewhere in the top 8. This draft didn't have a defensive player go until pick 15, which is unprecedented. So heavy offensive draft. As Toronto Dave says, quarterback city, and also just in general, wide receivers, tackles, everything. So, the Jets make the safe pick. People with Fashanu, people wanted them to take a wide receiver. They wanted them to take Brock Bowers, but I don't know. I saw Aaron Rodgers came on the Pat McAfee show, and he seemed maybe a little slightly disappointed that they didn't take Bowers, but he was like, I like the tight ends we got. He mentioned Kenny Yeboah and Jeremy Ruckert, so he knows how deep that depth chart is, and is what it is for them. At the next pick, the Broncos, they take their quarterback Bo Nix. Everyone wanted them to trade back and do all these things, but like again, you saw what the Falcons did, right? If you believe he's the guy, then you get the guy. And I was saying that when I had Bo Nix at 12 in my mock draft, I was saying, if this team believes Bo Nix is the guy, why would they get cute and trade back and possibly lose this guy? In fact, we know that another team was interested in Bo Nix because they had to trade up one spot to get him, right? If if no other team is a threat to draft Bo Nix, oh sorry, that was JJ McCarthy. The Vikings traded up one spot to get JJ McCarthy. We know another team was interested in JJ McCarthy, so because they had to trade up one spot. You don't trade up one spot to draft a player if you don't think someone else is going to take him. But and it could have been the Broncos that were looking at him. The Broncos get their guy, and I think Bo Nix is a good fit. Honestly, there are Broncos fans that are judging it and doing all this stuff. It's like, why take that road as a Broncos fan? Why 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 go in negative before you even know, before we even see this guy play? It's easy enough to look at this guy and say, "Hey, you know what? This guy's very smart, very intelligent, right? He is good at reading defenses before the snap. He can get the ball out of his hands in short spaces, which is exactly what they want to do." Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi led the league last year in passes to the running back, right? That's what they did with Drew Brees all this time. So you have Zach Wilson and Bo Nix, 2 guys that can do that, right? You don't worry about the rest of it because the short game opens up the long game. So if they can do that successfully and they can be accurate and do those things, then why not get excited and just fall into that side of optimism? People always want to default into the negativity. I see you, Mile High Luke. And I know you guys, and you're negative to get you. I get that, dude. I get that. It's like um, the reverse jinx, right? Where you just say, oh, you know what? I hate it. I'm negative and hoping it pans out. I just say, you know what? Let the chips fall where they may. We don't know. We don't know. Brock Purdy and Tom Brady and all those guys have taught us that. So for me, I fall on the side of positivity. If Sean Payton can teach this guy up to run his offense and run it the way he wants to, this guy could be solid. They need to get him at least another weapon. We'll talk about that coming up here. But yeah, I don't mind it. I like the Bo Nix pick. A pick I didn't like personally. Oh, Brock Bowers to the Raiders, man. I've done extensive research on this, and the number one caveat for tight end success, not just for rookies, across the board. The number one caveat is opportunity. And the biggest hurdle is being a top two target on your team. That is the clearest path to upside. And again, I would love for it to have been something like, a certain talent or speed or spin moves or some other metric that would, give us advantage and, make it so we could be, the super tight end prognosticators. The reality is that opportunity is the key. And that's what's given us an advantage in the yin and yang tight end and all the systems we use, and why, people say tight end whisper. I don't say that, but people say it because we know what it takes to get to that level. And the number one thing is being a top two target on the team. So I'm not worried about Michael Mayer affecting his targets necessarily. This does suck for Michael Mayer, and I had some hopes for Michael Mayer. I was never big on him, but this is not good for him. But just the fact that they have Devontae Adams, who's a target hog, and Jacoby Myers, who deserves his targets, makes it difficult for him to be a top two target on the team. And I think he's great. And again, yeah, Fox Posier says it right in the chat. Shout out to the Twitch gang. Twitch glasses for the Twitch gang. Thank you for popping in and hanging out with us. Haven't had the Twitch glasses out in a while. Fox Posier coming over from Twitch saying horrible QB, Jacoby's the number two, bad team. Yes, that's the problem, right? And so the reality of that team now that we have to look at is this: Devontae Adams is going to get his targets. He's going to get a lot, a lot, a lot. That's just how it goes when you have Devontae Adams. After that, you have to guess who's going to be the number two. And being the number two doesn't even necessarily guarantee you to have high end upside. So even if the targets are just split among Myers and Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, then we're in trouble. Then they might all be irrelevant for fantasy football. We wanted Brock Bowers to go to a team where he could be immediately a top two target on the team and play wide receiver. The Chargers would have been great. If the Bengals traded T. Higgins and he went there, it would have been phenomenal. The Raiders, it's going to be fine over the long run because we trust the player in Dynasty. But for redraft, now he's not a slam dunk like we had hoped. What's going to happen here is that Michael Mayer is going to continue playing inline tight end, right? That's the deal, is that he's going to play inline tight end. And yeah, as Mile High Luke points out, yeah, of course. Like, well, no, that's the thing is, of course, that's the setup, is that Mayer's going to be the inline tight end like Dallas Goedert was with the Eagles, and Bowers just gets to play slot all the time and be a wide receiver like Zach Ertz was. But that's great when you have an Eagles setup like they did in 2000, I believe it was 2018 or 16, where Zach Ertz leads the team in targets, and number two on the team is Michael Mayer. That's how you get the Zach Ertz 156 target season, and Dallas Goedert is also kind of fantasy relevant. That's not the case. The guy that's going to get 150 targets is Devontae Adams. That's the problem. You can have a two tight end setup with Gronk and Hernandez, where Gronk's tight end one in fantasy football and Hernandez is tight end three when those guys are one and two on the team in targets. Not when there's a Devontae Adams and a Jacoby Myers there and Gardner Minshew is throwing the ball. That's the problem. So over the long term, yes, when Devontae Adams leaves, then the window for excellence is open. Just like with Dalton Kincaid. Stephon Diggs is gone, and the window for excellence is absolutely open. We just have to wait for it now, which sucks. I didn't want to have to wait. I'm just being impatient. That's what it is. I love the player, and the landing spot is okay, right? It's not like he landed with the Dolphins or the, like if he landed with the Dolphins, he was behind Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill for a minimum 2 or 3 more years. That would have been a nightmare. That would have been the full nightmare. This is only kind of a half nightmare where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, it happened. It was real, I guess, but we'll be fine. But yeah, I just didn't love it. I wanted to love it. I didn't love it. So there you go. Enough on Brock Bowers. Saints take offensive lineman, smart. Colts take Laiatu Latu, which he had some injury questions. In fact, Jimmy Lake who is now with the Falcons, was the coach at the time for Washington when he was there, and they actually didn't clear him to play football. That's how bad the injury situation was. They basically told him that he should medically retire, and he went and got a second opinion and transferred to UCLA, and he played there. Which the people were like, "Oh, the Falcons are going to take him because Jimmy Lake knows this guy a lot too." And I'm like, Falcons are not going to take this guy because they basically told him to quit football because of injury issues. Imagine if Jimmy like that would be the biggest flip flop in the world for Jimmy to like to be like, "Oh, by the way, I know I told you you should never play football again, but whoops," you know what I mean? Like, no chance. And just imagine if Jimmy Lake tells him to draft that guy, and then he does have the injury issues, and everyone's like, Jimmy, what the hell? You know? So that was just never going to happen. Latu to the Falcons, right? So, but the Falcons, they took a quarterback instead, so it doesn't really matter. Seahawks took Byron Murphy. Love that pick. Defensive interior is the defensive interior is huge now. And the Seahawks, if they're going to keep running the defense that Pete Carroll loves, they have this position on the defense that they used to call it elephant. I think they call it just like Leo now. I don't know why they switched the name, but basically it's just a three kind of a when they use a three lineman front, they always have this big guy to anchor a big defensive end, three tech defensive end to anchor that side of the field. And that, Byron Murphy can do that as a defensive tackle. He can kind of move all over. And you look around like Javon Hargrave, he got paid a ton of money. Christian Wilkins a ton of money. Christian Barmore is going to get paid a ton of money. Jalen Carter went at 9. Aaron Donald has was the driving piece behind this whole situation. Like that's why Matt behind the glass points out Matt Abuke. I mean, like that it's been such a driving piece, the defensive interior push that teams are drafting these guys higher, and that's why you see Byron Murphy as the second defensive player off the board as a defensive interior player. It's huge. I love the pick for them. I wanted the Bengals to take either Byron Murphy or Jerzon Newton to replace DJ Reader, even when with the Trey Hendrickson issues, they didn't do that. We'll get to them in a second. What's up, guys, in the chat? Jerry Nelson, what's happening? Nick, what's popping? Yeah, some surprising picks in the mix there for sure. And yeah, Penix was the number one surprise. Brock Bowers probably number two. I agree with you on that one. Next, the Vikings take Dallas Turner. Love that. Vikings big winner here because they didn't have people were talking about them trading up 3 firsts or whatever to take JJ McCarthy. Instead, they trade up one spot, don't even give up their 2021 first, get JJ McCarthy, and then they get Dallas Turner, a guy that a lot of people had as the top player on defense in this draft. So great draft for the Vikings. Bengals took Amarius Mims, big dog on the outside. It's interesting for them because they have 2 offensive tackles that are set to start for them. And Mims, I don't know if you can really play him at guard. I got to look more into it. Maybe they just will, but he seems like a big guy that probably only plays tackle. So he might not even start for that team. Might be a swing tackle, but still, Bengals they need to get the offensive line going. They've been trying to do that for years, so I like it. Rams get Jared Verse. Shout out Rams. Shout out to Ani Kupi. Shout out to Anand Nanduri and all the Rams folks. LQ for their first round pick in like a billion years. So good for them. Jared Verse, a great two-way guy. He plays well in the run and he plays well in the pass. So he can be an every down guy in a 4-3. So I think it's a good pick in Jared Verse there. The verse stands for versatility in that guy. That's kind of corny, but it's true. Like some of these guys are only pass rush or only run block. He can do it all, which means he can just stay out there all game, which is nice. Fox exposure will definitely get to slick Ricky Pearsall. We're going to hit on everybody real quick. I'll just rapid fire through the end here. Troy Fontenot. I mean, classic Steelers pick. Even sounds like a Steelers name. Maybe it's the Troy Polamalu, but Troy Fontenot just sounds like a Steeler name. Like there are certain guys that just sound like Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger, Pat Fryermuth, right? Like lunch pail dudes. Troy Fontenot absolutely has that like Samoan flair to it. And again, I don't know. I'm not sure if he's Samoan or not, but like that Steeler flair, the Troy Fontenot. Miami Dolphins, Chop Robinson. Love the name Chop. Defensive end, good pick there. I thought the Cardinals were going to trade up. I had Chop Robinson at pick 21 in my mock, but I had the Cardinals trading up and taking him. The Dolphins just stay put and took him there. Eagles, Quinion Mitchell, good pick. It was kind of flat at offensive tackle and corner in a few of these spots where it's like, to me, I look at it and I say, how can you be disappointed? Oh, I wanted Cooper DeJean. I wanted this other corner. It was close enough that it's okay. Like Quinion Mitchell could easily be the top corner here. You don't have to get your undies in a bunch over not taking Nate Wiggins because you really wanted Nate Wiggins. It's going to be okay. Quinion Mitchell's a great player. So it doesn't matter how you rank them, in my opinion. The fact that you got one is what matters. You got the first one off the board. So congratulations. Jacksonville Jaguars, they took Brian Thomas Jr. Great pick. This guy's 6'3, 210. He can play on the outside. People have him comped to Calvin Ridley. So he goes, plays on the outside immediately. And then you have Gabriel Davis as a field stretcher. You have Christian Kirk in the slot. You have Evan Ingram also operating in the slot and as a tight end. All set. Good spot. Good stuff for the Jaguars. And we like him for fantasy football for sure. Lions took Terry and Arnold. Again, another guy. Could have been the top cornerback. Probably was for the Lions. Like when people they take these guys, a lot of people are taking their top guy because nobody has the same board. So got to be pumped as a Lions fan. Packers took Jordan Morgan. They are already loaded up at wide receiver, running back. They have Josh Jacobs. Quarterback, they're all set. Tight end, they have two of them. And we like them both. So yeah, offensive line, defense. That's what they're going to do. It's easy to be a Packers fan right now. Bucks took Graham Barton, the best center or guard. Everybody wants to take a tackle and convert him to guard or whatever. Sometimes there's something to be said about just taking the best guard, right? Like Cowboys took Zach Martin instead of Money Mayfield, and that worked out pretty well for them. So sometimes you just take the best guard and enjoy having the best guard. You don't have to take a tackle and convert him to guard. That doesn't always work. Cardinals took Darius Robinson, which is good. It's a fine pick. That was just honestly of all the names here, literally the entire list here. That's one of the few guys that I didn't have in my mock. It wasn't really on my radar as like a slam dunk first round pick, but he's fine. You know what I mean? It's a solid pick there. Chiefs, this is where it gets spicy here at the end of the draft for fantasy football, especially is the Bills. They traded back and let the Chiefs take Xavier Worthy. And I tweeted about this. The Ravens, when the Chiefs needed a tackle, gave them they gave them Orlando Brown in a trade. And I know the Ravens didn't need Orlando Brown because they had Stanley, but like, don't do that. Don't help them. Why are you helping them? This team and the Patriots did it when the Chiefs needed a cornerback. They traded them the pick to take Trent McDuffie, right? And the Patriots needed a cornerback. Yeah, I know they got Christian Gonzalez next year, but don't give them Trent McDuffie. Don't give them Xavier Worthy. Do you remember Tyreek Hill? Do you remember how bad that was for everyone? Like, you shouldn't be giving them this player. And now they have Marquise Brown on a 1-year prove it deal and Xavier Worthy, who does something very similar. And Marquise Brown is going to come in and he's injury prone or whatever. And he's going to get paid a ton of money next year if he does well. And then Xavier Worthy is going to take over and the Chiefs are going to be good for a long time. And they're already good. So stop helping this. Stop helping this team. Especially because the Bills, they had success with guys like John Brown and Emmanuel Sanders. They could have used Xavier Worthy. So I don't know, man. But again, I'm look at all the stuff behind me. It all says Bruins and Patriots and Celtics and Red Sox. So as a football fan, it annoys me as a Patriots fan. Good, fine, whatever. Hope the Bills lose. The Cowboys trade back, take Tyler Guyton. Shout out Jim Bowden, big Cowboys fan, but also a guy who was a GM for the Reds and the Braves, and he knows this stuff. He on the show last night said, "I want the Cowboys to draft Tyler Guyton, if possible, trade back and take him." That's what they did. They picked up capital, got their guy, Trey Bone. The Ravens get Nate Wiggins again, just collecting best available, and I love that for them. 49ers take Ricky Pearsall, and in the chat, see, Fox Exposure and the Twitch gang were asking about that pick. I like Ricky Pearsall, right? And here's how it's going to work for fantasy football. Right now, the way it's set up, if nothing happens, then Ricky Pearsall is going to have a slow burn start, kind of like Chris Godwin, kind of like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Here's why. It's because this team uses 2 wide receivers and a tight end and a running back that play virtually every snap. And those guys are Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. And they use Kittle and McCaffrey more than most teams use the running back and tight end. These guys play legitimately 100% of the snaps at times, which no one does. So those guys are always out there. And the problem for the wide receiver 3 is that they use Kyle Juszczyk on virtually half of the snaps. So when you bring in Juszczyk, you're not taking out McCaffrey, and you're not taking out Kittle, and you're not taking out Deebo, and you're not taking out Ayuk. So the guy that comes out is the wide receiver 3, which was Juwan Jennings. So Ricky Pearsall is going to come out of the game for those snaps in this current iteration. Now, there are rumors that they could trade Brandon Ayuk, they could trade Debo Samuel. If and when that does happen, it's wheels up for Ricky Pearsall. And that's just what happened with Chris Godwin with the Bucks, where it was Mike Evans on the outside and it was Deshaun Jackson on the outside. And when Deshaun Jackson was gone in year 3, boom chakalaka, right? So same thing with the Seahawks. It's DK Metcalf and it's Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigma is the third man. So when he gets that chance to be the full-time guy, he'll be the guy. It even happened with CeeDee Lamb. Go back and look at CeeDee Lamb. It was Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. And CeeDee Lamb played 94% of his snaps from the slot as a rookie. He's the only rookie since I've been or the only player since I've been tracking this to play more than 85% of his snaps in the slot and finish as a wide receiver 2 or better. And he was exactly wide receiver 24 that rookie. So it's very difficult from that role, the role that Josh Downs is in and these guys are in, to be a Tyler Boyd, to be a part-time slot guy and have tremendous upside, right? But did you see what happened when Amari Cooper was gone and CeeDee Lamb became a full-time player? Laser show. So that's what we're doing. In Dynasty, we're drafting these guys and we're waiting. And in redraft, we're probably staying away unless they trade Ayuk or Debo Samuel, and we'll get to that momentarily. So that's the deal with Ricky Pearsall. Easy peasy, right? And see you in the chat, better boss. Maybe Ayuk gets traded, maybe Debo gets traded. And if that happens, boom, now we're in redraft as well. We're in Dynasty, and if that happens, we're also in redraft. So we just got to keep our ear to the streets. And that's why right now, what we're doing is we're focusing on Dynasty. And we will get back to best ball soon. We will get, obviously, redraft. We want to try and push those drafts as far back as we can, right? You want to push, the Scott Fish Bowl is in July. You should not be doing a redraft league before the Scott Fish Bowl is over. And just a quick shout out to everybody on Reddit. We hit the $5,000 mark we set. Can you believe it? And we added another Scott Fish Bowl. And we added and we added a Bijan Robinson autographed jersey. Thank you, everyone, for donating there. Thank you, everyone, for getting involved in that. The thing we need to get involved in right now, though, is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code Coop. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. And guess what? I'm going through things right now, kind of recapping. Next week on Wednesday, we are bringing in one of the biggest big guns when it comes to rookie drafts in Thor Nystrom on Wednesday to help us sort everything out and rank these guys and crush our rookie drafts. That's what we're doing. So yeah, get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code Coop. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, myffpc, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. A league has never been disbanded on ffpc.com. That's directly from Eric Bachman over there has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up. Let's get back to this. Last pick in the draft, the most volatile in the first round possible, Xavier Legette. For people that don't know, this guy, he had a great last season in college. 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, 70 catches, looked awesome. Highlights are awesome. Everything's cool. But that was his 5th year. The best season he had before that was only 197 yards. This guy is a true late last man to show up breakout. And Dwayne McFarland has done some studies on this, and a bunch of people have done studies on this. There's actually a negative correlation with guys that break out late, to the point where guys that have this breakout age and break out in this fashion, they bust at a crazy high level compared to the guys that even do nothing. Straight like it mathematically, looking at the numbers, like guys that do nothing in college and are undrafted break out at a higher rate than guys that do this. It's a nightmare. It's scary. And he goes, obviously, that guy goes to the most volatile possible team in the Panthers, where we don't know if Bryce Young is going to be good or not. We don't know if this team's going to be a poverty franchise. They just got Deontay Johnson, who gets 9 targets a game. He's gotten 9 targets a game over the last 4 years. They have Adam Thielen. It's crazy. It's just it couldn't be crazier, dude. It could not be crazier. And then, I don't know if I could do a Legette impersonation, but the Legette impersonation is literally just like sleep. If I just slept through the entire show, and in the last 10 minutes of the show, I woke up and just absolutely crushed it. That's what Xavier Legette's career has been. So, yeah. What's up, Drew, in the chat? What's up, everybody? So yeah, let's get into that's high risk, high reward. And again, at a certain point in my rookie drafts, I just pick those guys. Like I'm not going to go and draft a guy that went in the 4th round or whatever, but I'm going to take the safe guys first, and then I'll get to the high risk, high reward Xavier Legette type guys. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. That scares me. The standard deviation of where he's going to be ranked is so crazy because some people, the film people love him, the statistics people hate him, and like some people are going to rank him here, some people are going to rank him off the chart over here. It's going to be wild. So we'll see on that. But let's get to previewing this round here because my goodness, as Obi-Wan points out, would love to see Buffalo trade for Ayuk. This is the powder keg, right? This is like the World War One assassination of Archduke Ferdinand build up powder keg situation here. Because you look at the teams at the top of the 2nd round, and there's a ton of wide receivers that we love. Because even with Pearsall and Legette going at the very end of the first, there's a ton of wide receivers that we love left, and there's a ton of teams here that could be big and looking for a wide receiver. Ooh, Yush. Oof. I mean, look at this. The Bills absolutely need a wide receiver. They've got Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, all players that we kind of like. I don't really like Shakir, but they're all good like slot guys, but they don't really have a true outside presence. They have Mac Hollins as a field stretcher, but they could use a field stretcher or they could use a big body guy. I mean, in my mock draft in the 1st round before they traded back, I had them taking Troy Franklin. If they take Troy Franklin here, in my opinion, big winners. They go from being losers to winners because they get the guy that I wanted them to take. That's a good fit for them, and they pick up capital by trading back twice. Huge if they do that. And as Obi-Wan points out, I would love to see Ayuk sent to Buffalo. Yeah. Thing is, they don't really have the money. Like they don't quite have the money to pay Ayuk or pay T. Higgins or pay Debo Samuel if that's the trade. The team that does is picking second in this route at pick 34. The New England Patriots have the most cap space of any team in the NFL. If they're because you have to remember, just like the DeAndre Hopkins trade, where DeAndre Hopkins was traded for a 2nd round pick and David Johnson and change, you weren't trading for DeAndre Hopkins. You were trading for the right to make DeAndre Hopkins the highest paid wide receiver. And you don't have to necessarily make T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk the highest paid wide receiver in the league, but you got to give them $30 million a year because that's what Amon-Ra St. Brown got, and that's what Michael Pittman got, and that's what all these guys are getting. That's what Devonta Smith and all these guys are getting. So if that's what the price is, that's what AJ Brown, we're talking about $30+ million. So not every team can trade for these guys. The Cowboys, the Bills, it's hard for them to just do that because these guys want to get paid. So the Patriots, that is a team that could do it. At pick 34 plus, you make that move. So that's going to be hot, boy. If they don't do that, the guy I think they could take as a Patriots fan, I mean, I like Ladd McConkey. And people say Ladd McConkey, everyone wants to do the easy, lazy comps. They want to say, oh, Ladd McConkey, white, slot, right? He's Welker, he's Edelman. And the truth is, Edelman is a good comp, but not the way that people want to do it. People think like Edelman was like Cole Beasley, just playing the slot every snap and just dinking dunking short targets all the time. That's not what happened. Julian Edelman played every single snap. This guy was playing 1,000 snaps. So he would play 500 snaps in the slot, but he would play 500 snaps out wide too. This guy was playing a ton of snaps out wide. He was an every down player. He was Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen plays a ton of slot, but he doesn't come off the field. That's what this guy is, Lad McConkey. Lad McConkey is an every down technical route runner that can play outside and inside. Just because he's white, we want to say he's just a slot guy, and he's not. So I would love for him to go to the Patriots. Patriots discount. You got Tom. If Tom Brady and Julian Edelman is what you got, then you go to Costco version of that with Drake May and Lad McConkey. I'll take Costco Brady and Edelman all day long. You know what I mean? Dollar store. It's not. We're not talking Timu Brady and Edelman. But we're talking maybe a slight discount. But hey, I would love to see it. So that's what I want. I want Troy. If no one's trading, I want Bills first pick tonight. Troy Franklin. Patriots next pick. Lad McConkey. After that, the Cardinals have a ton of. It goes Cardinals in Washington. They have a ton of picks in these rounds, so they could make these two picks here and trade up again and pick again because the Cardinals have 4 picks tonight, and then they pick at 104. So they have another one of the first picks tomorrow. So yeah, Jack, Troy Franklin the buff. Let's make it happen. So excuse me. And again, the Cardinals they could take another wide receiver, even though they took Marvin Harrison. I mean, Greg Dortch isn't really lighting the world on fire. And I like Michael Wilson as a split end, but who knows? We've seen teams double tap wide receiver, bing bang. The Jaguars did it with Marquise Lee and Allen Robinson. I've seen it plenty of times. So maybe they do. The Commanders also could take a wide receiver. They have Terry McLaurin, John Dotson. We'll see. That's where that Washington pick is where we could see a tight end go. And that's where a guy like Jatavian Sanders, who I comp to Zach Ertz, could go, or Jaheim Bell as a deep dark horse. So Jatavian Sanders, you can bet he's like plus 300 with the books to go as a second tight end, or Jaheim Bell is like plus 4,000. And I sprinkle a little money on that because he is kind of similar to Brock Bowers. He's like a discount Brock Bowers. And if Cliff Kingsbury wants to use a tight end out of the slot and give the guy 6.5 targets a game like he was given to Zach Ertz, then those are the guys, Jatavian Sanders and Zach Ertz. So that's what I would go for at that spot, right? So that's where I'm going at. Some people, Ben Sennett or Theo Johnson, they could be the next tight end as a two-way tight end, but I'm hoping that that's what happens. After that, you have the Titans probably going defense. You look around through this draft at who could make a splash on offense. There's plenty of teams that could draft a wide receiver here, but these are the rounds where we're going to start looking at running back. I know somebody mentioned it in the chat. Jack mentioned running back for my Cowboys. Where do these running backs go? That would be, if we're talking about solidifying our rookie picks and fantasy wishing, that pick at 56, or maybe even trading up. If the Cowboys take Jonathan Brooks there, it will be wheels up. And we talked about this before, where in the modern era, the ACL injury isn't as bad as it once was. I watched Jeffrey Simmons tear his ACL in February before the draft, and the Titans still took him in the first round, and he turned out to be awesome, right? I watched Jameson Williams tear his ACL, and the Lions traded up and took him in the first round. And I think he's going to be just fine. Whether he's good or not, it doesn't seem like the knees bother him. He's still hitting crazy speeds on the field and running end rounds for touchdowns, deep balls for touchdowns. If he busts, I don't think it's because of the knee. He seems fine out there, right? So if the knee is fine for Jonathan Brooks, then he is the best running back in this class, in my opinion. And the guy that did the knee surgery on his knee, which we've mentioned, is Dan Cooper, no relation to me, the doctor for the Dallas Cowboys. So nobody knows more about this guy's knee than the Dallas Cowboys. The Dan Cooper probably knows more about Jonathan Brooks' knee than Jonathan Brooks does. So if they clear him and they like him and they need the running back and they take him there, he's my RB1 with a bullet. I know Derek Brown came on the show and he's obsessed with Marshawn Lloyd. It's going to be Marshawn Lloyd and Jalen Wright no matter what. He can do that stuff all he wants, for me, if that's the pick and that's the draft order and that's the draft capital, just gonna go with the best guy going to the best spot, you know. And we'll see what happens with those picks because I like those guys too. And if the Cowboys take Marshawn Lloyd as the first running back off the board, guess what? He'll probably be my running back one. If they're the first people and they take Jalen Wright, then we'll do it that way. Like I like a lot of these profiles. It's very smooth. There's nobody that's like definitively much better than everybody else, in my opinion. So as the draft shakes out, we get the narrative and the landing spots and everything. Then we'll finalize it. But that's going to be a big impact. Who goes first to an RB needy team, and who falls and who slides, and that's how we build it. We don't have to play. We're not playing Devi right now. We don't have to make a decision right now. So that's the beauty of it. And when you look at guys like that we respect and we love and we look at their content like JJ McCarthy and Dwayne McFarland, who I mentioned earlier, in their formulas, they will tell you the number one metric for success and the number one weighted part of their formulas is draft capital. Now, there's a huge chunk of analysts in this industry that would like you to believe that they're very special and they know something special and they're trying to sell you something and they're trying to sell you this notion that they are better and smarter than draft capital and they know more than all these NFL teams and they can beat the system. You know what I mean? And maybe they can. And if they can, then they should probably be sending their resume to all these NFL teams because they could get paid a gazillion dollars if they're smarter than the industrial scouting complex of the entire NFL. For the rest of us living in the reality world of fantasy football, draft capital matters. And the narrative of the draft matters. Who trades up, who trades down. The narrative matters of who it needs a player and passes on a player. If a team that needs a wide receiver passes on that player, I'll move them down. We did this with Marvin Mims in the second round a couple years ago, where we grouped all the split ends together, the big body guys. And we had people loved Marvin Mims and they loved Chase Claypool and they loved Michael Pittman and they loved T. Higgins. And when push came to shove, T. Higgins and Michael Pittman went bing bang at the top of the second round. And then teams that needed a split end passed on guys. And then the Steelers who needed one, they took Chase Claypool instead of Marvin Mims. And then the Jets came up on the clock and they traded out of that pick. They traded back. And then later on, they circled back and took Marvin Mims. To me, when that happens and a team that needs that type of player doesn't believe in that player enough, not just to trade up, but to even take them there, to trade back and say, oh, you know what, if we get them, we get them. If we don't, we don't. We don't care. And then they take that player, that's an indictment. And for me, that's going to factor into how I view these guys and how I rank these guys. And we took Marvin Mims and we didn't quite throw him over our shoulder, but we moved him down. There was no world where I was going to rank him ahead of T. Higgins or Michael Pittman. And people were still doing that. People did that with Hakeem Butler. People loved Hakeem Butler so much. And he was the wide receiver one and the best guy they've ever scouted, blah, 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 that they couldn't handle him not getting drafted on day two, one or two, or in the third round at all. And even though he fell so far in the draft, they still ranked him at one or two or three, and they got smoked. And anybody that followed them into those fires inhaled all that smoke too. So be very careful with people that make their pre-draft rankings and they just stick by them and they don't change them. That is dangerous. And I do respect the film work and the things these people do. It's just not how I play. I think it's a dangerous way to end up with a lot of guys like Hakeem Butler and Kelvin Harmon and Preston Williams rotting on your bench until you have to drop them. So enough of that rant. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. So for me, just to wrap this up real quick, there's a whole group of guys, and I'll just give you some names right now that these two rounds, number one, how they get drafted and narrative of the draft and the landing spot is going to matter. But also, if they do not get drafted in the second and third round, even if I like them now at this moment, if they fall to the fourth or fifth round, I'm moving them way down. That goes for guys I like Troy Franklin and Ladd McConkey and Roman Wilson. There's a world if they don't get drafted, then we have to adjust. And I'm not going to be too egotistical to make those adjustments. So I look at Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, Keon Coleman is another dangerous one. If he goes early, got to consider him. If he falls, that is scary because this guy did not have the production and he basically played basketball at Michigan State and then kind of transferred to FSU. Like those are scary profiles. Roman Wilson, another one. Is Roman Wilson good? And he just didn't get volume at Michigan because they didn't throw the football? Or is he going to be great? Or is he just not good? If he doesn't get drafted, that's scary. JJ McCarthy got drafted, so maybe Roman Wilson will. you got to remember Nico Collins went to Michigan. They didn't throw the ball, and he slid in the draft, and he turned out to be okay. Third round pick, and he looks great now. So you got Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, both from Washington. I have moved Jalen McMillan up after Brandon Huffman came on our show and loves Jalen McMillan. If he loves him, I love him. He's one of the best scouts in the world, in my opinion. Brandon Huffman is an absolute superstar. So if he likes Jalen McMillan, I like Jalen McMillan. Mile High Luke, two perfect names right there. Jermaine Burton, who has character issues, and Javon Baker, who transferred from a big school to a little school and then had a bunch of, he broke out at Florida International. I like Javon Baker a lot. Derek Brown came on the show. He likes him a lot. He reminds me a lot of guys like, honestly, like Rushy Rice and potentially like Keenan Allen. And he has great contested catches, great body control. He's not super fast. So, yeah, if those guys go in these rounds, I'm in very much. And if Jermaine Burton falls, that's the kind of guy, because eventually you have to start taking stabs on guys that go in the fourth and fifth and sixth round. You got to pick somebody, right? Jermaine Burton, that's the kind of guy I'm going to pick, because I look around at the guys that break out from these later rounds, and it's guys that fell for non-football reasons, right? Julian Edelman wasn't drafted because he was a quarterback. Pierre Garcon fell in the draft because he went to Mount Union. That's like Division III. Stephon Diggs and Antonio Brown and Tyreek Hill had character issues, which is why they fell. Jermaine Burton has character issues. He's been kicked out, basically told he's not welcome at certain schools, transferring all over the place, going from high school up to college. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't got to hang out with him. I'm going to work with him. If a team likes this guy, despite those issues, that means he has skill. And I would much rather take a stab on a late round guy that has talent than draft a guy that's probably just going to play special teams. So Jermaine Burton, honestly, in my opinion, I'm kind of rooting for him to fall in the draft because I need to find somebody to take in those later rounds. And I would rather take a guy that falls for character than falls because he's going to be tackling guys on special teams, on punt and kickoff. So I'm hoping he falls. But yeah, I mean, Jermaine Burton, Devontae Walker, maybe the Patriots pair Drake May with his college teammate Devontae Walker, and of course Johnny Wilson, the last one, which people, myself included, would love if he switched to tight end, but he says he doesn't want to do it. But if he gets drafted and then a team turns to him and says, "Hey, we're gonna have you work out with tight ends," what's he gonna say? No, no. You got to make the team by any means necessary. So we'll be interested there. At running back, Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, uh, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, Braylon Allen, and then of course Bucky Irving, Audric Estime, Ray Davis. They didn't have great combines, but neither did Kyron Williams. So those are the guys we're looking for today. And the last ones are the tight ends. Again, for short-term value, landing spot's huge. Draft capital is big. The two that I want to go tight ends 2 and 3, I want to see them go today, are Jatavian Sanders and Jaheim Bell. If those two players get picked today, I will be fired up. So we're rooting for Jatavian Sanders, Jaheim Bell. The other two that I'm not as like super crazy excited about because they're more two-way tight ends. They're not like just pure pass catchers. But if Ben Sennett is the second tight end picked, or Theo Johnson is the second tight end pick, or Eric All, who I like Eric All, Brandon Huffman doesn't like Eric All. We'll have to see. But if those guys are the second tight end picked, and then there's a big gap or whatever, that's the tight end too. Like, I'm not going to, again, there's so many things that we don't know as part of this process, like talking to these players, boots on the ground. Brandon Huffman talks to these guys, but like we don't have that opportunity. We're not in the interviews, we're not going to the dinners, we're not doing all this stuff. So I'll throw my own ego out the window. I'm rooting for guys to get drafted to confirm my research. I look at everything: yards per route run, 40 time, splits, the breakout age, teammate score, all this stuff. I look at all that. I got a spreadsheet. Certain guys are green, certain guys are red. If the green guys go early, even better, because now the NFL opinion matches up with our opinion. When Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta went 1 and 2 last year, that's exactly what we wanted. When Luke Musgrave went early enough, that's exactly what we wanted. The pass catching guys got drafted early. It confirmed for us what we were hoping for, and everything lined up, and then we could draft them. That's beautiful, right? We want Jonathan Brooks for the Cowboys. We want Jaheim Bell to go to a team where he's going to play slot every play, like like Brock Bowers is going to play slot every play for the Raiders. And again, we wanted more for Bowers, but If Gene Bell goes to the Chargers to play the Mark Andrews role, or Jatavian Sanders goes to the Chargers or goes to the Commanders to be an every down slot player, boy, will I be excited about that. And I hope that happens tonight. And if it doesn't happen, you know what? They'll probably slide in our rookie drafts and we can pick them later and throw them on a bench, but we're not going to go out of our way to chase these guys if the league doesn't like them. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at Jatavian Sanders, Jaheim Bell, Ben Sennett, Theo Johnson, Eric All, Cade Stover, Jared Wiley, Dallin Holker, Devin Culp, who ran a 4.47. Don't care if they get drafted early. We're into it. Tip Ryman is a guy who I truly believe is going to be a blocking tight end. I will not get excited, even if he goes in the second round. If he's the next tight end picked off the board, Drew Sample win the second round. It's because he blocks. It's because he is going to be used on kickoff, blah, blah, blah. So, like, I refuse to get excited about Tip Ryman. The rest of those guys I will get excited about. And I'm willing to be wrong on that. That's one where I will let my ego get in the way. I'm not in on it. But that's it. All right. I mean, we could talk for a full hour on tight ends if you want. Instead, what we're going to do is this. I'm going to get you guys out of here. We're going to go live on Sirius XM from 5 to 7 p.m. That's going to be with Jim Bowden and the GM Howard Bender. And we got a great show planned for you guys. And, this show is kind of your psychotic, everything all in your face. On that show, we're gonna pare it down to some great stuff, some predictions, some bets. It's going to be awesome. So make sure you're tuned in from 5 to 7. I'm going to keep running the tracker. I'm going to keep putting videos out, little shorts on here. So, dude, today's the day. Today's a big day for Dynasty, man. This is it. This is the cliff. This is where the guys are in or out. It's going to be awesome. So thank you guys all for hanging out in the chat. Thank you, Matt Deutsch behind the glass. Thank you, Ani Koopy, for coming over and watching my daughter, Lainey, so that I could come on and talk to you guys for an hour. That's it. I'm out of here. Big day tonight.